Hi, how are you doing? This is AWS By Doing. I am Madhu Vasudevan from the AWS By Doing team. Welcome to this educational video series, AWS By Doing, wherein you can learn AWS Cloud Computing by following along with an AWS Certified Solutions Architect. We acknowledge and thank the official AWS documentation material which we have used to produce this educational video. Although we will try to keep all resources consumed eligible for the free tier, ensuring that you are not charged or minimizing your charges is your responsibility. To minimize charges, remember to delete all created chargeable resources after each session. This time, we will walk you through a hands-on lab on create some display files for a website, create an S3 bucket for a Cloudfront origin, upload the website files to the S3 bucket, create a Cloudfront distribution with the S3 bucket as origin, test the Cloudfront distribution, update and test the Cloudfront distribution, delete all created resources. The estimated cost for doing this hands-on is no charge as Amazon CloudFront is free tier eligible. The prerequisite AWS skill level is beginner with general understanding of S3 and CloudFront concepts. To set up a free tier eligible AWS account and a user with sufficient permissions, check out our video on Create Admin User. Please find all commands code snippets in the video description, globally replacing the left square bracket and right square bracket with the left angle bracket and the right angle bracket respectively. Following are the commands to generate content for this sample distribution from a Linux terminal or Windows PowerShell. So, fire up a Windows PowerShell or Linux terminal. Change directory to a convenient working directory. Make directory my website files. Change directory to my website files. Create index.html file. Create specificfile.html. Create subfolder file1.html. And create subfolder file2.html. Next, without violating copyright, please get an image file and copy it to the My Websites folder. I will just use my company logo file for this purpose. Let's see what we got. ls, and let's see what we have in those files. So cat each one of them. Let's cat index.html, note its contents, Let's cat specificfile.html. Note the content. Let's cat subfolder file1.html, which says file number 1. And let's cat subfolder file2.html, which says display file number 2. So far so good. Next, let's create an HTML file with a link to a file in the PC's current folder. Let's create a testpage.html file. You could use your favorite text editor. And yes, it is a new file. For content, we'll just copy this, which has a link to an image in the PC's folder. Copy paste, Control S to save it, and close the text editor. Let's test the HTML file with the link to a file in the PC's current folder using this URL on a browser tab. Paste that URL on a new browser tab, and it looks good. So the link in the HTML file works. Next, let's upload the content to Amazon S3 and grant object permissions. An Amazon S3 bucket is a container that can contain files, objects, or folders. Cloudfront can distribute almost any type of file for you using an Amazon S3 bucket as the source. For example, Cloudfront can distribute text, images, and videos. You can create multiple buckets, and there is no maximum for the amount of data that you can store on Amazon S3. By default, your Amazon S3 bucket and all the files in it are private. Only the AWS account that created the bucket has read-write permissions to the files. If you want to allow anyone to access the files in your Amazon S3 bucket using Cloudfront URLs, you must grant public read permissions to the objects. This is one of the most common mistakes when working with Cloudfront and Amazon S3. You must explicitly grant permissions to each object in an Amazon S3 bucket. If you want to restrict who can download your content, you can use the Cloudfront private content feature. To create a distribution, create one Amazon S3 bucket as your origin server. An origin is the location where you store the original version of your content. When Cloudfront gets a request for your files, it goes to the origin to get the files that it distributes at edge locations. You can use any combination of Amazon S3 buckets and HTTP servers as your origin servers. Since we are using Amazon S3, note that the name of your bucket must be all lowercase and cannot contain spaces. For this hands-on, we will create a bucket by name myOrigin-account ID or alias to make it unique. For content, we will have two files, index.html and specificfile.html. in the bucket. Also, we will create two subfolders. One subfolder called just subfolder, and that subfolder will have two files, the ones we created earlier, subfolder file1.html and subfolder file2.html. Our bucket will also have another folder called images, in which we will copy the image that you set up earlier. In my case, I was just using our company logo image. To upload your content to Amazon S3 and grant read permissions to everyone, sign in to the AWS Amazon Management Console and open the Amazon S3 console. On the Amazon S3 console, choose Create Bucket. In the Create Bucket dialog box, on the Name and Region page, enter a bucket name. Ensure that it is unique. For your bucket to work with Cloudfront, the name must conform to DNS naming requirements. For the region, choose an AWS region for your bucket. By default, Amazon S3 creates buckets in the US East North Virginia region. We recommend that you choose a region close to you to optimize latency and minimize costs. Or you might choose another region to address regulatory requirements. Choose Next. On the Configure Options page, choose the options for versioning, tagging, or other features, or I would just leave them at the default. Choose Next. On the Set Permissions page, clear the checkbox for Block All Public Access. You must allow public read access to the bucket and files so that CloudFront URLs can serve content from the bucket. However, you can restrict access to specific content by using the CloudFront private content feature. Select the checkbox for I acknowledge that the current settings may result in this bucket and the objects within becoming public. Choose Next. Review your selections and click on Create Bucket. In the Buckets pane, choose your bucket and then choose Upload. On the Select Files page, drag and drop your files to the bucket, or choose Add Files and then choose the files that you want to upload. We need to populate the bucket per this design. So I'll open my website files folder and select index.html and specificfile.html and drag them for upload into my bucket. Click on Next. Under Manage Public Permissions, grant public read access to these objects so that everyone in the world will have read access to this object. Click on Next. You could modify storage class and encryption and add tags, but I'll just go with the default and click on Next. Review the two objects and upload. Next, we need to create a bucket folder by name subfolder. On the S3 screen, click on Create Folder, call it subfolder, and click on Save. Check subfolder. Under Actions, make it public, so that everyone will have access to one or all of the following. Click on Make Public. Go into that subfolder and click on Upload. From our My Website Files folder, select subfolder 1, subfolder file 2.html and drag them for upload to this folder in bucket called subfolder. Click on Next. Under Manage Public Permissions, grant public read access to these objects so that everyone in the world will have read access to these objects. Click on Next. For storage class, encryption and tags, I'll just go with the defaults and click on Next. Review these two files and click on Upload. Next, we need to create another bucket folder called Images. Go back to Amazon S3 console. Click on your bucket, My Origin AWS By Doing, or the unique bucket name that you created for this origin purpose. And here we create another folder. Name it Images. Scroll down and click on Save. Remember to check the Images folder. Click on Actions and make it also public so that everyone will have access to one or all of the following objects. Make it public. Go into the Images folder, click on Upload. From My Website Files folder on my PC, select the image that you had selected and drag it for upload. Click on Next so that you get to manage public permissions and grant public read access to this object so that everyone in the world will have read access to this object. Click on Next. Go with the defaults for storage class, encryption, metadata. Click on Next. Review and upload. So we have accomplished this. Let us check our bucket and its contents. Click on index.html. Look at the object URL and click on it. It opens up and shows the contents. Click on back arrow so that you return to your S3 bucket. Click on the bucket name. Open specificfile.html. Click on the object URL. So it displays its contents. Click on back arrow. Click on bucket name. Go into subfolder. Click on subfolder file1.html. Click on the object URL and a display file number 1 is shown. Click on back arrow. Click on subfolder. Click on subfolder file2.html. You could click on the open and it's opened in another browser tab. Close that browser tab. Click on your bucket name. Go into images. Click on your image file. Click on object URL and it opens up the object. Click on back arrow. So we have done good so far. You could just open a browser tab and you could just key in the URL of any of those objects. In a fresh browser tab and check the access. Let's check subfolder file2.html. And you have your display file number 2. So the S3 object bucket has public access. Next, let's create an HTML file with link to an object in the S3 bucket. So we'll create or edit our testpage.html file and include this link right here. So let's go to our PowerShell or Linux terminal window. And edit testpage.html. We'll just copy this and paste it as a fresh new content for this testpage.html. Control S to save it. Make sure we have our link right here. And close the editor. Let's test the HTML file with link to an object in the S3 bucket. From a browser window. So let's open testpage.html. the S3 bucket link works. Good job. Now we are ready to create a Cloudfront distribution. Open the Cloudfront console. Click on Create Distribution. On the Select a Delivery Method for your content page, in the Web section, choose Get Started. On the Create Distribution page, for origin domain name, choose the Amazon S3 bucket that you created earlier. My origin-AWS by doing.s3, in your case, your unique origin bucket name. For the settings under Default Cache Behavior Settings, accept the default values. When you accept the default values for the cache behavior settings, Cloudfront will forward all requests that use the Cloudfront URL for your distribution. It will allow end users to use either HTTP or HTTPS to access your objects. It will respond to requests for your objects. It will attempt to cache your objects at Cloudfront edge locations for 24 hours by default. It will forward only the default request headers to your origin and not cache your objects based on the values in the headers. It will exclude cookies and query string parameters, if any, when forwarding requests for objects to your origin, and it will allow everyone to view your content. Cloudfront will not be configured to distribute media files in the Microsoft Smooth Streaming format, and Cloudfront will not automatically compress your content. Under Distribution Settings, choose the values for your distribution. For Price class, choose the price class that corresponds with the maximum price that you want to pay for the Cloudfront service. By default, Cloudfront serves your objects from edge locations in all Cloudfront regions. For AWS WAF Web ACL, accept the default value of none. For alternate domain names or CNAMEs, accept the default value, that is, leave the field empty. For SSL certificate, accept the default value, default Cloudfront certificate, that is star.cloudfront.net. For supported HTTP versions, accept the default value, HTTP/2, HTTP 1.1 and HTTP 1.0. Default root object is optional. The object that you want Cloudfront to request from your origin, for example, our index.html, when a viewer requests the root URL of your distribution, instead of an object in your distribution, if the default URL is specified, how should Cloudfront respond? For now, leave it blank. Logging is optional. Accept the default value of off. Comment is also optional. For distribution state, choose enabled. For enable IPv6, you can choose the default value, accept the default value, and click on Create Distribution. After CloudFront creates your distribution, the value of the status column for your distribution changes from in progress to deployed. This typically takes a few minutes. The domain name that CloudFront assigns to your distribution appears in the list of domains. You must wait until the status of the distribution changes to deployed before you can test your links. You could click on Refresh to update the status. It is still in progress, so just take a small break and come back. After you have created your distribution, CloudFront knows where your origin server is, and you know the domain name associated with the distribution. You can create links to your objects using the CloudFront domain name, and CloudFront will serve the objects to your web page or application from edge fronts. When your CloudFront status shows deployed and state shows enabled, click on the ID and go into the General tab of your CloudFront distribution. You will again see the domain name here. Copy it to your clipboard. Next, let us run some CloudFront distribution tests from a browser. We know that our CloudFront domain name is this, which we just copied to our clipboard buffer. So let's copy this link, this URL, to test for a specificfile.html. Open a new browser tab, paste it out there, and for CloudFront domain name, copy the CloudFront domain name, paste it into the link and hit enter. And there you have your display file from the CloudFront distribution. Let's do the same for the other files and check the distribution. Make sure you use the right distribution name or domain name. And there's our subfolder display file number 1 from an edge location. Let's check subfolder file 2. Hit enter, and we have our display file Number 2. Let's check the logo on the images folder. Get the right domain name of our distribution. Paste it into our test URL for the image file in the images folder and hit enter. There you go. The image comes up. Finally, let's test the default. What will the Cloudfront distribution do if you just specify the domain name? Will it show index.html? Uh-oh, we did not specify the object root or the domain root as index.html. So we will need to fix this, modify the Cloudfront distribution to fix the domain object root. But before we modify our distribution, let's run one last test. Let's create an HTML file with a link to an object in the Cloudfront distribution. So let's create or edit our test page.html. Hopefully you still have your terminal window open. So edit test page.html, and we will include a link to an image in the Cloudfront distribution. So let's get the domain name from our distribution. Use that distribution name in our test page. Beware of spaces and unwanted characters. Copy out this content . And paste it in our HTML page, the test page.html. Make sure the image link looks correct. Control S to save it. Close the test editor. To test the HTML file with a link to an object in the Cloudfront distribution, open the file in a browser. So the file location, you can get it from your terminal. So open a fresh browser tab, key in the URL of your testpage.html from your computer, hit enter, and you have got your Cloudfront distribution link to your image correct. The image is being served out of a Cloudfront distribution edge location. Update the distribution in the Cloudfront console. You can see the Cloudfront distributions that are associated with the AWS account. You can view the settings for a distribution and update most settings. Be aware that setting changes that you make won't take effect until the distribution has propagated to the AWS edge locations. To update a Cloudfront distribution, sign in to the AWS Management Console and open the Cloudfront console. Select the ID of the distribution you want to change. The list includes all of the distributions associated with the AWS account that you had used to sign in to the Cloudfront console. To edit the settings of a distribution, choose the Distribution Settings tab. Click on Edit. Scroll down to Default Root Object. Specify the default root object, which in our case is index.html. You can change whatever parameter you wish to change. And click on Yes, Edit. The distribution status shows in progress. When you save changes to your distribution configuration, Cloudfront starts to propagate the changes to all edge locations. Until your configuration is updated in an edge location, Cloudfront continues to serve your content from the local content based on the previous configuration. After your configuration is updated in an edge location, Cloudfront immediately starts to serve your content from that location based on the new configuration. Your changes don't propagate to every edge location instantaneously. When propagation is complete, the status of your distribution changes from in progress to deployed. While Cloudfront is propagating your changes, we unfortunately can't determine whether a given edge location is serving your content based on the previous configuration or the new updated configuration. So wait for the status to show deployed. You could click on the refresh icon and check the status in progress or deployed. After a few minutes, the status of your CloudFront distribution will show deployed and will hopefully also be enabled. And we are ready for the tests. Let us test for root URL in the updated CloudFront distribution. Copy the domain name, and then it's https:/distribution domain name, and this time we have our index.html. So the CloudFront updated the root object. We could run some of the earlier tests to make sure that nothing got disturbed or nothing got broken. So let's check subfolder file1.html. Use the correct domain name. Without spaces, and display file subfolder 1 is good. Let's check the logo or the image file in the images folder. Logo is good. So make sure each of your objects are showing up per the CloudFront distribution. Having successfully run all the tests on our CloudFront distribution, we can disable and delete the CloudFront distribution. Since we no longer want to use the distribution, we can delete it by using the CloudFront console or even by using the CloudFront API. Be aware that before you can delete a distribution, you must disable it, which requires permission to update the distribution. If you disable a distribution that has an alternate domain name associated with it, CloudFront stops accepting traffic for that domain name. Even if another distribution has an alternate domain name with a wildcard that matches the same domain. To delete a CloudFront distribution, sign in to the AWS Management Console and open the CloudFront console. In the right pane of the CloudFront console, find the distribution that you want to delete. If the value of the state column is disabled, only then can you delete it. So for now, first, you need to click on Disable after selecting your distribution. Click on Disable. In the Confirm dialog box, click on Yes, Disable. Click on Close. You see that the state is disabled and the status is in progress. So wait for it to be completely disabled. Because Cloudfront must propagate this change to all edge locations, it might take anywhere from 15 to 90 minutes before the update is complete and before you can delete your distribution. Wait until the status column changes to deployed. Eventually, the value of the status column changes to deployed. Now you can check the checkbox for the distribution that you want to delete and click on delete. Click on yes, delete to confirm, and you can click on close. Your distribution has been deleted. You can also delete the objects from the bucket and delete the bucket that you were using as the origin for your Cloudfront distribution. You can delete an empty bucket, and when you're using the AWS Management Console, you can delete a bucket that even contains objects. If you delete a bucket that contains objects, all the objects in the bucket are permanently deleted. When you delete a bucket with versioning enabled, all versions of the objects in the bucket are permanently deleted. To delete an S3 bucket, sign in to the AWS Management Console and open the Amazon S3 console. In the buckets list, select the option next to the name of the bucket that you want to delete or want to empty. Having selected the origin bucket, click on empty . Confirm by keying in the name of your bucket. Click on confirm, and hopefully you have emptied the bucket. You could check by going into the bucket and it is empty. Click on Amazon S3 and this time check the bucket you wish to delete, and this time click on delete bucket. Again, you need to key in the bucket name. You could copy paste and click on confirm, and you have deleted the bucket. You have deleted all resources that you had created in this session. Congratulations on a job well done. Thanks for following along. Please like this video to encourage us. Share this video with your friends and colleagues. Also, subscribe to this channel AWS By Doing, and we will update you regularly with our latest and greatest offerings. Write in a comment of what you liked and how we can improve. Check out our playlist of more labs from the link in the description. Happy cloud computing, and we will see you again in the next episode from the AWS By Doing team.